Most people believe that a fortune must begin with a large sum, an inheritance, a windfall, a number big enough to feel like a real start. So they wait, quietly convinced that anything smaller isn't worth the effort, and in that waiting, months become years, and the fortune they imagine never actually begins. In Japan, there is a method built entirely on the opposite belief. Today, I want to tell you about the jar method, a quiet practice using nothing more than 200 yen a day, applied through the philosophy of Kaizen, that allowed ordinary people to build what looked, decades later, like a genuine fortune. This is not about the size of the beginning. It is about the size of the commitment, 1% at a time, without stopping. Let me tell you about a woman named Yuki. Yuki worked as a seamstress in a small shop in Kanazawa. Her income was modest, and for years she believed, like many people, that real savings required money she simply didn't have. 200 yen felt laughable to her, barely the cost of a small snack, nothing that could ever add up to something meaningful. So she saved nothing at all, telling herself she would begin properly once her income improved. One winter, her landlady, an elderly woman named Kobayashi, showed her a plain glass jar sitting quietly on a kitchen shelf. "Every day for 40 years, Kobayashi said, "I have placed 200 yen into a jar like this one. Not when I felt like it, not when it was convenient. Every single day." Yuki laughed gently and asked what 40 years of 200 yen could possibly amount to. Kobayashi simply smiled and said, "You are still thinking about the yen. I stopped thinking about the yen decades ago. I was only ever thinking about the day." That evening, Yuki placed her first 200 yen into an empty jar of her own, expecting very little, but willing, for the first time, to begin. This is the essence of the jar method, and the heart of Kaizen itself, the understanding that the amount was never really the point. The daily act, repeated without exception, was always the real fortune being built. Think of a jar filling with sand, one grain falling at a time. In any single moment, the jar looks exactly the same as it did a moment before. No visible change. No sense of progress. If you judged the method by any one day, you would conclude, reasonably, that nothing was happening. But sand does not care about being judged in a single moment. It continues falling, day after day, indifferent to whether anyone is watching, until the jar that once looked empty is suddenly, undeniably full. 200 yen is a single grain of sand. Ignored, it means nothing. Placed daily, without missing a single day, it becomes something that eventually cannot be dismissed. Why does something this small actually build real wealth over time? Because the mind resists large financial commitments, but rarely resists small ones, and here is what most people miss. A small commitment, protected daily, quietly builds two things at once: the money itself, and the identity of someone who follows through. That second part, the identity, often matters more than the first, because it eventually shapes every other financial decision a person makes. The common mistake is believing that 200 yen is too small to matter, when in truth, the smallness is exactly what makes the habit survivable for 40 years. A dramatic commitment rarely lasts that long. A quiet one often does. So how can anyone begin their own version of the jar method? Let's break it into 3 areas. First, choose an amount so small that missing a day feels unnecessary, not difficult. The jar method fails when the amount feels like sacrifice. It succeeds when the amount feels almost too small to skip. Second, keep the jar, or its equivalent, physically present and visible. Kobayashi's jar sat on her kitchen shelf for 40 years, seen every single day, a quiet, wordless reminder that required no motivation, only awareness. Third, refuse to calculate the ending too early. Yuki wanted to know what 40 years would produce, and Kobayashi refused to tell her, saying only, "Build today's grain. Let tomorrow worry about tomorrow's total." Constantly calculating the distant future often creates discouragement in the present. Trust the process, one day at a time. None of these steps require significant income. None of them promise quick results. And that is exactly why most people, even hearing this simple method, will still wait for a larger sum before they consider beginning at all. Yuki kept her jar for over 25 years. She never became wealthy in any dramatic, sudden way. But quietly, steadily, what began as 200 yen a day became a fortune substantial enough to support her family, fund her children's education, and provide the same quiet security Kobayashi had once shown her in a simple glass jar. When her own grandchildren asked how she had done it, she gave the same answer she had once received. "I stopped thinking about the yen. I only ever thought about the day." This is the choice in front of you. You can keep waiting for a sum large enough to feel worthy of saving, letting the years pass without ever truly beginning. Or you can place something small into a jar today, and return tomorrow, and the day after, without stopping. The jar does not need to be full today. It only needs 1 grain to begin. If this way of thinking speaks to you, consider subscribing to Will and Wisdom, because we explore ideas like this every week, quiet philosophies that build a life worth having. Leave a comment and tell me the small daily amount you will begin with today. And if you're ready to see how small habits shape extraordinary lives, the next video is waiting for you.